It's about that time. Welcome to the Word of the Day. Thank you for joining me. Last week we finished with the first book of the prophet Samuel, and today we will explore the second book. And I pray you discover something in the good book that you never noticed before. Please, by all means, consider subscribing to my channel. Today we visit King David, the second book of the prophet Samuel. When we last visited the nation of Israel, the Philistines went out and fought against Israel. The Israelites fled before them, and many fell and died on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines were in hot pursuit of King Saul and his sons, and they killed his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce around King Saul, and when the archers caught up with him, King Saul was hit and was critically wounded by their arrows. King Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and kill me, or these uncircumcised Philistines will come and torture me and kill me." But his armor-bearer honored and reverenced King Saul too much to do that. He was terrified and would not kill him. So King Saul took his own sword and fell upon it. When the armor-bearer thought that King Saul was dead, he too fell on his own sword and died with his king. So King Saul and his 3 sons and his armor-bearer and all his men, the army of Israel, died together on the same day on Mount Gilboa. When the Israelites along the valley and those across the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled and that King Saul and his sons had died, they abandoned the towns and ran for their lives. The Philistines came and occupied the towns, and the next day when the Philistines came to plunder the dead, they found King Saul and his sons dead on Mount Gilboa. They cut off the king's head and stripped him of his armor, and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to proclaim the news in the temple of their idol Ashtoreth and among their people. They put the king's armor in the temple of their idols and fastened his body and his sons' bodies to the wall of Bashan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to King Saul, all their valiant men marched throughout the night to Bashan. They took down the bodies of King Saul and his sons from the wall of Bashan and went to Jabesh, where they burned their bodies. Then they took their bones and buried them under a tamarisk tree at Jabesh, and they fasted 7 days. For if we remember, when King Saul first became king over the nation of Israel, his first conquest was saving the people of Jabesh Gilead from the Ammonites. So the people of Jabesh Gilead are the ones that honored King Saul at his death. Now after the death of King Saul, David had returned from killing the Amalekites, and he and his 600 men went back into Philistine territory to the town of Ziklag and stayed there 2 days, because David was staying in Philistine territory while he was a fugitive from King Saul. On the 3rd day there came a man that arrived from King Saul's camp, and his clothes were torn, and dust was upon his head. When the man came to David, he fell to the ground to pay David honor. "Where have you come from?" said David to the man. "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." "What happened?" David asked intently. "Tell me." The man said, "Many men fled. Many of them fell and died during the war, and King Saul and his sons are dead." David said to the man, "How do you know for sure that the king is dead? How do you know that King Saul and his sons, Jonathan, are dead?" The man said, "I was on Mount Gilboa, and there was King Saul leaning upon his spear. He was not dead. Chariots were chasing him down in the hot pursuit of him. He turned around and saw me there, so he called out to me, and I said, 'What can I do for you, King?' He asked me, 'Who are you?' And I told him, 'I am an Amalekite.' Then he said to me, 'Stay by me and kill me, for I am close to death anyway. I'm in the throes of death, but still alive.' So I stood next to him, and I killed the king. because I knew that he would not survive. So King Saul did not kill himself, but it was the Amalekite. The man said, I took the crown that was on his head and the band that was around his arm, and I have brought them here to you, my lord. The young man thought that David would honor him for what he did, but clearly he didn't know honorable David. But instead David and all the men with him took hold of their clothes and tore them in mourning for King Saul. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for King Saul and his son Jonathan and the army of the Lord and for the nation of Israel, because the mighty had fallen by the sword. And David said to the young man who brought the terrible report, Where are you from? I am a son of a foreigner, an Amalekite. David asked him, Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? Then David called one of his men and said, Kill him now. So he killed the Amalekite. For David had said to the man, Your blood is on your own head. Your mouth has testified against you, when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed. For you knew he was the king, and you killed him anyway. David took up this song and expressed it concerning King Saul and his son Jonathan, and he ordered the people of Judah to be taught this expression of the bow. It is written in the book of Jasher. David said, A gazelle lay slain on the heights. Israel, how the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Askelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, and lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice. Mountains of Gilboa, may you neither have rain nor dew. May no showers fall on your terraced fields. For there the shield of the mighty was despised, and the shield of King Saul no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back. The sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied. Saul and Jonathan, in life you were loved and admired, and in death you were not parted. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Daughters of Israel, weep for King Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned you with garments and ornaments of gold. How the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain on your height. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of a woman. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished. This is chapter number 1. Over the course of time, David inquired of the Lord, Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah? So the Lord said, Go up. David asked, Where shall I go? And the Lord said, To Hebron. So David went up there with his 2 wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in Hebron in its towns. Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. And when David was told that it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who had buried King Saul, he sent messages to them to say to them, The Lord bless you for showing your kindness to King Saul, your master, by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because of what you have done. Now then, be strong and brave, for King Saul, your master, is dead, and the people of Judah have anointed me king over them. Meanwhile, Abner, the son of Ner, the commander of King Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, King Saul's son, and brought him over to Mahanaim. He made him king over Gilead, Ashuri, and Jezreel, and also over Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. King Ishbosheth, the son of King Saul, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, but he did not reign very long. He was only king for 2 years. The tribe of Judah, however, remained loyal to King David. The whole time David was king in Hebron over Judah, was 7 years and 6 months. Now Abner, together with the men of Ishbosheth, the son of King Saul, left Mahanaim and went to Gibeon. Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and David's men went out and met them at the pool of Gibeon. One group sat on one side of the pool, and one group sat on the other side of the pool. Then Abner said to Joab, "Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand to hand in front of us." So they made it a sport to defeat each other in battle. "All right, let them do it," Joab said. So they stood up and counted off, 12 men for King Ishbosheth and 12 men for King David. Then each man grabbed his opponent by the head and thrust his dagger into the opponent's side, and they fell down to the ground. So that place in Gibeon was called Hezkath Hazarim, which means the plot of sharp blades, or the field of heroes. The battle that day was very fierce, and Abner and the Israelites were defeated by David's men. Now the 3 sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Now Asahel, the youngest brother, was fast on his feet like a wild gazelle. He chased after Abner, turning neither from the right or to the left. He pursued him. Abner looked and yelled behind him and asked, "Is that you, Asahel?" "It is," he said. Then Abner said to him, "Turn away. Take one of the younger men and strip him of his weapons." For Abner was a fierce man of war, the commander of King Saul's army. But Asahel would not stop chasing him. I believe Asahel treated it as a great conquest, that if he beat Abner, he would make a name for himself. Again Abner warned Asahel, "Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face?" But Asahel refused to give up the pursuit. So Abner thrust the butt of his spear into Asahel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. He fell there and died on the spot. And every man stopped when they came to him, the place where Asahel had fallen dead. But Joab and Abishai and Asahel's brothers pursued Abner. And as the sun was going down, setting, they came to the hill of Ammah. Then the men of Benjamin rallied behind Abner. They formed themselves into a group and took their stand on top of the hill. Abner called out to Joab, "Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their fellow Israelites?" Joab answered, "As surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued pursuing until the morning." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the troops came to a halt. Besides Asahel, 19 of David's men were found missing. But David's men had killed 360 Benjamites who were with Abner. They took Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb in Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men marched all night and arrived at Hebron by daybreak. And this is 2 Samuel chapter number 2. The war between the house of King Saul and the house of King David lasted a long time. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of King Saul grew weaker and weaker. Sons were born to King David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon, the son of his wife Ahinoam of Jezreel. His second was Chileab, the son of Abigail, the wife of Nabal of Carmel. The third was Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmi, the king of Geshur. The fourth was Ajalon, the son of Gareth. The fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. The sixth, Ithream, the son of David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron during the war between the house of King Saul and the house of King David. Abner had been strengthening his own position in the house of King Saul. Now King Saul had a concubine named Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And King Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" Abner got very angry at this because of what Ishbosheth said. So he answered him, Am I a dog's head on Judah's side? Meaning on the side of King David. This very day I am loyal to the house of your father King Saul, and to the family and friends. I haven't handed you over to King David. Yet now you accuse me of an offense involving this woman. May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord promised him by an oath, and transfer the kingdom from the house of King Saul, and establish King David's throne over Israel and Judah, from Dan to Beersheba. Now Ishbosheth did not dare say anything to Abner after that, because he was afraid of him. Then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to say to David, "Whose land is it? Make an oath with me, and I will help you bring all Israel over to you." "Good," said King David, "I will make an oath with you. But I demand one thing of you. Do not come into my presence unless you bring my first wife Michal, daughter of King Saul, when you come to see me." Then David sent messengers to King Ishbosheth, son of King Saul, demanding, "Give me my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the price of 100 Philistine foreskins, which I gave to your father, King Saul." So King Ishbosheth gave orders and had her taken away from her husband Paltiel, the son of Laish. Her husband, however, followed her, weeping after her all the way to Bahurim. Then Abner said to him, "Go back home." So he finally left. Abner conferred with the elders of Israel and said, "For some time you have wanted to make David your king. Do it now, for the Lord has promised David. For he said, 'By my servant David I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies.'" Then he went to Hebron to tell David everything that Israel and the whole tribe of Benjamin wanted to do. And when Abner, who had 20 men with him, came to David at Hebron, David prepared a feast for him and his men. Then Abner said to David, "Let me go, and I will assemble all Israel for my lord the king, so that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may rule over all that your heart desires." So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Just then David's men and Joab returned from a raid and brought with them a great deal of plunder. When Joab and all the soldiers with him arrived, he was told that Abner, son of Ner, had come to King David, and that the king had sent him away in peace. So Joab, being still bitter about the death of his brother Asahel by the hands of Abner, so Joab went to the king and said, "What have you done? Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Abner, the son of Ner. He came to deceive you and observe your movements, and to find out everything that you're doing. You can't trust him." Joab then left David and sent messengers after Abner, and they brought him back from the cistern at Sarah. But David did not know about it. Now when Abner returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in an inner chamber, as if to speak with him privately, and there to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed him in the stomach, and Abner died. Later, when David heard about what Joab had done, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and his whole family. May Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sore, leprosy, or leans on a crutch, or falls by the sword, or lacks food." So the king cursed Joab and his descendants for his wickedness. For Abner never murdered Asahel, but he defeated him during battle. But Joab sought Abner out and murdered him, because his brother was defeated in battle at Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all the people with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth, and walk in mourning in front of Abner." King David himself walked behind the bier. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king wept aloud at Abner's tomb, and all the people wept with him. The king sang this psalm in memory of Abner. Should Abner have died as the lawless die? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not tied. You fell as one who falls before the wicked. And all the people wept over him again. Then all came and urged David to eat something while it was still day. But King David said, I made an oath, saying, and may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun goes down. So all the people took note and were pleased. Indeed, everything the king did pleased them. So on that day all the people there and all Israel knew that King David had no part in the murder of Abner the son of Ner. Then the king said to his men, do you not realize that the commander and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And today, though I am the anointed king, I am weak. Of these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 3. When King Ishbosheth heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost his courage and all Israel was afraid. 2 men who were leaders of raiding groups. One was named Baanah and the other was named Rechab. They were the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite from the tribe of Benjamin Beroth. Now Jonathan the son of King Saul had a son who was lame in both his feet. For when he was 5 years old, when the news about the death of his grandfather King Saul and Jonathan his father came from Jezreel, his nurse picked him up and ran with him in her arms when she heard the news. But as she was hurrying to leave, he fell out of her hands and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth. Now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, set out for the house of King Ishbosheth. And they arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They went into the inner part of his house and they stabbed the king Ishbosheth in his stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah ran away. They had gone into the house while the king was lying on his bed in his bedroom. After they stabbed and killed him, they cut off his head, taking it with them. And they traveled all night by way of the Arabah. They brought the head of King Ishbosheth to King David at Hebron, and said to the king, here is the head of King Ishbosheth, the son of King Saul, your enemy, who tried to kill you. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against King Saul and his offspring. David answered Rechab and his brother Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, as surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble. When someone told me King Saul was dead and thought he was bringing me good news to me, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and none the less in his own bed? Should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you? So King David gave an order to his soldiers, and they killed them. They cut off their hands and their feet and hung their bodies by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of King Ishbosheth and buried him in Abner's tomb in Hebron. And this is 2 Samuel chapter number 4. All the tribes of Israel came to King David at Hebron and said, we are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became the king, and he reigned over Israel for the next 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7.5 years, and in Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. King David and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites there. The Jebusites insulted the king by saying, "You will not get into our fortress. Even the blind and the lame can fight you off." They thought David couldn't do it, but they would be wrong. David captured the fortress of Zion, which he later named the City of David. On that day, David said, "Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach those lame and blind people who are David's enemies." That is why they say the blind and the lame will not enter the palace, because of the Jebusites. King David then took up residence in the fortress which he called the City of David. He built up the areas around it from the terraces inward, and he became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent envoys to David along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons, and they built a palace for King David. Then David realized that the Lord had established him as king over all the land of Israel and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of the Lord's people, Israel. After David left Hebron, David had more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and had more sons and daughters born to him. The names of his children were born to David there was Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nephag, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphalet. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, they went up in full force to search for him. But David heard about it and went down to the stronghold. Now the Philistines had come and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?" "Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands." So David went to Baal Perazim. There he defeated the Philistines. As waters break out, the Lord has broken out against my enemies before me. So that place was called Baal Perazim. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. Once more the Philistines came up and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. So David inquired of the Lord, and he answered, "Do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the poplar trees. As soon as you hear the sound of rustling in the tops of the trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army." So David did as the Lord commanded him, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 5. Now David brought together all the able-bodied men of Israel, 30,000 in all. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God. Now Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with castanets and harps and lyres and timbrels and sistrums and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nashon, the ark appeared to be shifting on the cart. So Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God, because the oxen stumbled. But the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah, because he touched the ark. So God killed him instantly, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was upset because the Lord's anger had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. Now we should remember that Uzzah was a priest, but he most likely touched the ark of God itself instead of the two poles that were used to carry the ark of the covenant. After that, David was afraid of the Lord God that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me? So David did not move the ark into the city of David, but instead he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now when King David was told the Lord had blessed Obed-Edom and all his household because the ark of God was there, so David decided to bring the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David. Now David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with rejoicing and with the sound of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of King Saul, watched David from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty. Then he gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of the Israelites, both men and women. And all the people went to their homes. When David returned home to bless his household, his wife Michal, daughter of King Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his service, as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from your household when he anointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in high honor." And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death because of her words to David. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 6. After there was peace in the land, King David was settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest from all his enemies around him. Then David said to Nathan the prophet, "Here I am living in a house of cedar, while the ark of God remains in a tent." Nathan replied to the king, "Whatever you have in mind to do, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you." But that night the word of the Lord came to Nathan, saying, "Go tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of the land of Egypt until today. I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their leaders, whom I commanded to be shepherd of my people, 'Why haven't you built me a house of cedar?' Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men of the earth. And I will provide a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they can have a home of their own, and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore. As it was at the beginning, I will also give you rest from your enemies." The prophet Nathan continued on and said, "The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house, and your son is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted by human hand. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from King Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. After the prophet Nathan revealed the revelation of the Lord, King David then went into the tent and sat before the Lord. And he said, Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family that you have brought me this far? If this were not enough, sovereign Lord, you have also spoken about the future of my house. And this decree, sovereign Lord, is for a mere mortal. What more can I say to you, for you know me? Lord, for the sake of your word and according to your will, you have done this great thing and made it known to your servant. David continued to pray, How great you are, Lord! There is no one like you. There is no God but you. And as we have heard with our own ears, who is like your people Israel, the one nation on earth that God went out to redeem as a people for himself, to make a name for himself, and to perform the great and awesome wonders by driving out nations and their gods from before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. You have established your people Israel as your very own forever, and you, Lord, have become their God. Now, Lord God, keep forever the promise you have made concerning your servant David and his house. Do as you promised, so that your name will be great forever. Then the people will say, The Lord Almighty is God over Israel. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 7. Over the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. He took the land of Mithag, Ammah, and from the control of the Philistines, which was an area east of Gibeah. And David also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them off with a length of cord. Every 2 lengths of them were put to death, and the 3rd length was allowed to live. So the Moabites became subject to King David and brought him tribute. On top of that, David defeated Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, king of Zobah, who was a Syrian, an Armenian, when he went to restore his monument at the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. He even cut the hamstring of all but 100 of the king's chariot horses. When the Armenians of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, the king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons and armed military guard outposts in the Armenian kingdom of Damascus, and the Armenians became subject to him and brought him tribute. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. When Tou, king of Hamath, heard that David had defeated the entire army of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram to King David to greet him and congratulate him on his victory in the battle over Hadadezer, who had been at war with him. Joram brought with him articles of silver, of gold, of bronze. King David dedicated these articles to the Lord, as he had done with the silver and the gold from all the other nations he subdued, from the lands of Edom and Moab and the Ammonites and the Philistines and the Amalek. He also dedicated the plunder taken from Hadadezer, son of Rehob, the king of Zobah. And David became famous after he returned from striking down 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He put a military guarded outpost throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to King David as well. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people. Now Joab the son of Zeruiah was over the army. Jehoshaphat the son of Ahilud was his recorder. Zadok the son of Ahitub and Ahimelech son of Abithar were priests. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 8. Now one day, as David was remembering his dear friend and brother Jonathan, the son of King Saul, David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of King Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of King Saul's household named Ziba. They summoned him to appear before King David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" And he said, "At your service, your majesty." David said, "Is there no one still alive from the house of King Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still the son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. "He's at the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lodabar." So King David had Mephibosheth brought from Lodabar, from the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the grandson of King Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. King David said, "Mephibosheth, at your service, your majesty." "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at the king's table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belongs to King Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops, so that your master's grandson may be provided for. Mephibosheth will always eat at the king's table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord king commands me to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah, and all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth. He then lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. He was lame in both of his feet. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 9. Over the course of time, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him as king. David thought, "I will show kindness to Hanun the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me." So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father's death. When David's men came to the land of the Ammonites, the Ammonite commander said to Hanun, their king, "Do you think David is honoring your father by sending envoys to you to express sympathy? Hasn't David sent them to you only to explore the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" So Hanun seized David's envoys, shaved off half of each man's beard, and cut off their garments at the buttocks, sent them away. When David was told about this, he sent messengers to meet the men, for they were greatly humiliated. David told them to stay in Jericho till their beards had grown back. When the Ammonites realized that they had become obnoxious to David, they hired 20,000 Armenian foot soldiers from Beth Rohab and Zobah, as well as the king Maacah with 1,000 men, and also 12,000 men from Tob. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with the entire army of fighting men. The Ammonites came out and drew up in battle formation at the entrance of their city gate, while the Armenians of Zobah and Rohab and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him, so he selected some of the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Armenians. He put the rest of the men under the command of Abishai, his brother, and deployed them against the Ammonites. Joab said to his brother, "If the Armenians are too strong for me, then you are to come to my rescue. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come to yours. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight." Then Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, and they ran from them. When the Ammonites realized the Arameans were running away, they also ran from Abishai and went inside the city. So Joab returned from fighting the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. After the Arameans saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they regrouped. King Hadadezer had the Arameans brought from beyond the Euphrates River. They went to Halam, with Shobach, the commander of Hadadezer's army, leading them. When David was told this, he gathered all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and went to Halam. The Arameans formed their battle line to meet King David and fought against him. But of course they ran from Israel. And David killed 700 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. He also struck down Shobach, the commander of their army, and he died there. When all the kings who served King Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with the Israelites and became subject to them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 10. In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of his palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. His servant told David, "Her name is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. The woman Bathsheba became pregnant and sent word to King David, saying, "I am pregnant with your child." So David sent a message to Joab, the commander of the king's army, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." Joab sent the young soldier to David. When Uriah came to him, David made small talk, asking him how Joab was, and how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent to him, for King David wanted him to sleep with his wife, Bathsheba. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the king's palace with all the king's servants, and did not go down to his house to his wife Bathsheba. David was told Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, "Haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home to your wife?" And Uriah, being of such good moral character, said to David, "The ark of God and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and to make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him get drunk. But in the evening Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among the master's servants. He did not go home again. In the morning David wrote a letter to Joab his commander, and sent it with Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and killed." So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell, and Uriah the Hittite died. Joab then sent a message to King David, a full account of the battle. He instructed the messenger, "When you have finished giving the king this account of the battle, then say to him, 'And your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead.'" The messenger left and went to King David, And when he arrived, he told David everything Joab had sent him to say. David told the messenger, "Say this to Joab, don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack against the city and destroy it." Say this to encourage Joab. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to him in the palace, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. And this is 2 Samuel chapter number 11. The Lord sent the prophet Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, "There were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. Now David burned with anger against the man and said to the prophet Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity on the poor man." Then Nathan said to King David, "You are that man. This is what the Lord God of Israel says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I deliver you from the hand of King Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah, and if all this had been too little, I would have given you more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife as your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword will not depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight for all Israel to see." Then David said to the prophet Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan replied, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die, King David. But because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you and Bathsheba will die, because a sin always requires a death." After the prophet Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had born with King David, and the child became sick. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted and spent nights laying in sackcloth on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. On the 7th day, the child died. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought while the child was still alive, he wouldn't listen to us when we spoke to him. How can we tell him now that the child is dead? He may do something desperate. King David noticed that his attendants were whispering among themselves, and he realized that his child was dead. "Is the child dead?" he asked. "Yes, my Lord King," they replied. "He is dead." Then David got up from the ground after he had washed, anointed himself, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshiped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request they served him food, and he ate. His attendants asked him, "Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive, you fasted and wept, but now that the child is dead, you get up and eat." He answered them, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows, the Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again from the grave? I will go to him in death, but he cannot return to me." Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her, and she gave birth to a son, and they called him Solomon. The Lord loved him, and because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah, which means beloved of the Lord. Meanwhile, Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal citadel. Joab then sent messages to David saying, "I have fought against Rabbah and taken its water supplies. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise I will take the city and it will be named after me." So David mustered the entire army and went to Rabbah and attacked and captured it. David took the crown from the king's head, and it was placed on his own head. It weighed a talent of gold, and it was set with precious stones. David took a great quantity of plunder from the city and brought out the people who were there, consigning them to labor, and made them work at brickmaking. David did this to all the Ammonite towns. Then he and his entire army returned to Jerusalem. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 12. Now Amnon, the son of David, through Ahinoam, his wife, fell in love with Tamar, the beautiful sister of Absalom, David's other son, through his wife Maacah, the daughter of the king of Geshur. Amnon became so obsessed with his sister Tamar that he made himself ill. She was a virgin, and it seemed impossible for him to be with her. Now Amnon had an advisor named Jonadab, son of Shimeah, who was David's brother. Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He asked Amnon, "Why do you, the son's king, look so unwell morning after morning? Won't you tell me?" Amnon said to him, "I am in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. Go to bed and pretend to be ill. When your father comes to see you, say to him, 'I would like my sister Tamar to come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight, so that I may watch her and then eat it from her hand.'" So Amnon lay down and pretended to be sick. When the king came to see him, Amnon said to him, "I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight, so that I may eat from her hand." David sent word to Tamar at the palace, "Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him." So Tamar went to the house of her brother Amnon, who was lying down. She took some dough, kneaded it, made the bread in his sight, and baked it. Then she took the pan and served him the bread. But he refused to eat. "Send everyone out of here." So every one of his servants left. Then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food here into my bedroom, so that I may eat from your hand." Tamar took the bread she had prepared and brought it to her brother Amnon in his bedroom. But when she took it to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, "Come to bed with me, my sister." "No, my brother," she said to him. "Don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? You'd be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you." But he refused to listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he raped her. Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred. In fact, he'd hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, "Get up, get out." "No," she said to him, Sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me. But he refused to listen to her. He called his personal servant and said, "Get rid of this woman out of my sight," and bolted the door after her. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing an ornate robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore. So Tamar put ashes on her head and tore her ornate robe she was wearing. She put her hands on her head and went away weeping aloud as she went. Her brother Absalom said to her, "Has that Amnon your brother been with you? Be quiet, for now, my sister, he is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a ruined woman. When King David heard all this, he was furious, and Absalom never said a word to Amnon, neither good or bad. He hated Amnon because he had disgraced his sister Tamar. 2 years later, and when Absalom's sheep shearers were at Baal Hazor, near the border of Ephraim, he invited all the king's sons to come there. Absalom went to the king and said, "Your servant has had shearers come. Will the king and his attendants please join me?" King David said, "No, my son. All of us should not go. We will only be a burden to you." Although Absalom urged him, he still refused to go, but gave his blessing. Then Absalom said, "If not, please let my brother Amnon come with us." The king in his wisdom said, "Why should Amnon go with you?" But Absalom urged him, so he sent with him Amnon and the rest of the king's sons. Absalom ordered his men, "Listen, when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine, strike Amnon down and kill him. Don't be afraid. I have given you an order. Be strong and brave." And so Absalom's men did to Amnon what Absalom had ordered them to do. Then all the king's sons got up, mounted their mules, and ran away. While they were on their way, the report came to King David, "Absalom has killed all your sons. Not one of them is left." The king stood up, tore his clothes, and lay down on the ground, and all his attendants stood by with their clothes torn as well. But Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's older brother, said, "My lord king, he did not kill all the princes. Only Amnon is dead." This has been Absalom's motivation ever since the day Amnon raped his sister Tamar. Don't be concerned about the report that all the king's sons are dead. Only Amnon is dead. Meanwhile, Absalom had ran away. The watchman went and told the king, "I see men in the direction of Horonaim on the side of the hill." Jonadab said to the king, "See, the king's sons have come. It has happened just as your servant has said." As he finished speaking, the king's sons came in, wailing and screaming loudly. The king too and all his attendants wept very bitterly. Absalom fled and went to the king of Geshur. But King David mourned many days for his son Amnon. After Absalom fled and went to the king of Geshur, he stayed there for 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had peace with Amnon's death. This is 2 Samuel chapter number 13. Join me next week for the continuation of King David, the second book of the prophet Samuel. Thank you for taking this time with me. I pray it has been a blessing to you. Joshua 1:8 says, "This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success." And may you take these words into your heart, meditate on them continuously day and night until they become a part of who you are. Don't just let these words be pages in the book, but write them on the pages of your heart, that they may draw you into a greater a more intimate relationship with the Almighty God. Please assist me in making better videos and spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ by sowing a seed. I thank you in advance for your generous gift. Please like and share, and by all means subscribe to my channel. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Blessings and shalom. Have a blessed day.